It is a kind of mechanism which guarantees to the public, it's a demonstration of the accountability of the academia to the public. It ensures that to the external constituents that your program has defined goals and objectives. It provides advice and counsel to new and established programs in the accrediting process. When you're starting new programs, the accrediting agencies' recommendations could be ensures that programs receive sufficient support and are free of external influence. These are some of the benefits of the accreditation process. When the process of accreditation was launched, of course, there was a period of sensitization and interaction with the academia. The resistance moved through a state of apprehension to acceptance, and now from acceptance through a total identity with the process. As the process has matured, we've received positive criticism, we've received negative feedback. On the part of NAAC, we're trying our best to fine-tune our instruments and methodology. But what we would like to existence, accreditation was voluntary. I think after 5 years or so, it was made mandatory. A deadline of 2003 was set. The deadline is gone. There is nothing that institutions have to submit their self-study report. So, with or without NAAC, can we set performable targets? Can we learn from each other's best practices? Now, as a post-accreditation initiative, what we are trying to do is disseminate the best practices that we have identified across institutions. I will come to that a little later. Establish cross-functional and cross-divisional collaborations. Can we think of moving beyond our departments, moving beyond institutions, think of forming consortiums, think of pooling our resources? We know that duplication of resources, either manpower or physical infrastructure is no longer possible. So can we pool our resources and think in terms of cross-functional, cross-divisional collaborations? Use all these strategies to improve our functions and prepare for future projects. So these institutions come to faculty. We have more number of clock hour faculty, ad hoc faculty, temporary faculty than those who are on an aided basis. We have a class differentiation amongst institutions and within institutions. This gives rise to the quality of teaching learning that we are talking about. In any self-financing college, if there is an increase in pay offered to a teacher, he or she would switch his job at least 3 times during an academic year. This is the present position. Assessment will be a fundamental and integral part of any curriculum based on student learning outcome. If our emphasis throughout the teaching learning process is on student learning and the achievement of student learning outcomes, what can assessment do? We so far concentrated during the first cycle on accreditational environment or an educational ambience on campus. So it's not necessary that when we look for best practices or when we look for excellence in standards, education needs to borrow only from the corporate world. There are enough examples where we could look within ourselves. I've tried to put down the characteristics of a few best practices. Going across colleges and universities, we want to really undertake the orientation or the refresher courses offered by the staff colleges. Are we looking at teacher development as a continuous process, as a refresher process, or is it only to fulfill a mandatory requirement? So faculty development through the academic staff colleges, through the initiatives of our quality assurance agencies like NAAC, become very important. How do we keep, we may endlessly keep speaking about changing the mode of teaching within classrooms, making it more interactive, but then a question which bothers me is how do we propagate this, because we are a generation of teachers who have only seen the lecture method. So if we have to move from the lecture method to what we discussed in the previous session, the workshop, this is a very suggestive kind of thing. It's up to institutions to look at the composition of an IQAC. It basically would mean involvement of people within the institution. What would this IQAC or the steering committee what could be its composition. It should have people who are natural readers, good organizational and conceptual skills. For the first self-study report, you put in a lot of data which you could not find in your colleges. You gathered it possibly from old records, or you gave it just on the spur of the moment. But now you need to have, after 5 years, when you have progressed through the cycle, you need it documented, you need it systematized. So you have a group which works on this. You identify the subtasks which need to be accomplished, which informal leaders of the faculty or staff or the groups might be important. So over a period of time, all the various criteria, can you set?
Last month I attended this first meeting of the Bangalore University conducted by the Vice Chancellor, in which the Bangalore University is on the process of turning from this formal to the semester scheme, in which the university intends to start 2 new courses along with the traditional courses. The 2 subjects are fundamentals of computers, 1, and the other one is about the Indian Constitution as a mandatory subject. Now, there is a lot of resistance from the government colleges as well as the private and aided colleges also as to who would the bill, from where the resources would come. Although the Vice Chancellor was ready to, in fact, give a convincing reply, but many managements and many principals did oppose, and they said that it is well impossible to introduce these subjects because the introduction of the Indian Constitution amounting to BA, BSc and BCom courses would mean employing a large number of political science teachers or the law faculty, where it becomes extremely difficult. So also about computers, particularly from the rural colleges, there was a lot of opposition that now that we don't have any infrastructure as such, introduction of a computer course would not serve any purpose. For this, what is your answer?
Undergraduate syllabus in most other states, and I don't see why we should resist it in Karnataka. Indian Constitution, I mean, if the government is willing to provide you the people on time, on whatever lecture, clock out basis to provide the inputs, I think resistance is an inherent part of any change which comes about. Having been with NAC, I mean, I've seen it from right from the beginning that there will be resistance to any new idea, resistance to change. But it's like Charles Darwin said, it's not the strongest of the species nor the wisest who will survive, but those who are most receptive to change and adaptable. So I think computers and constitution is important. But there's one point which I'd like to make, that is about the semester system and continuous internal assessment. Somehow where the gap comes is when teachers feel that they are not involved in the process of decision making. If it is a top-down process, if you feel that the Vice Chancellor is giving you the semester system, then you do not want to accept it. And there needs, according to me, whatever innovation we bring, there needs to be a lot of exposure and a lot of training to teachers as to what it means. For example, we introduce continuous internal assessment. Continuous internal assessment means you track the performance of the student over a period of time, say 6 months, 1 year, whatever is your span of evaluation. But I know colleges which will conduct 3 quizzes, 3 essays, assignments at the end of the whole thing and say CIA. Now it is not that the CIA is bad, but the implementation of it. Implementation for whatever purposes. Possibly teachers are not educated about it, possibly policy makers have not taken the trouble to sensitize them, but there is this gap and then we blame the CIA.